Welcome to WMP TV. This is the Hawk. Today we will debate the congressional candidates for District 21 in Palm Beach County, South Florida. These candidates have all will be given 6 questions, each question lasting approximately a minute to a minute and a half, on different situations that could arise during their tenure. Hear out their candidates and enjoy the show. Can I ask you to each introduce yourselves, and then we'll go forward with the questions. Starting with you, Christian, please.
Sure. My name is Christian Acosta. I'm running for U.S. Congress in the 21st District. I've been a resident here for probably a combined 12 years. I actually grew up here, middle school and high school. My parents have been here for 20 years. I'm a professor at Palm Beach State College. My training from the University of Florida is as a nuclear engineer, so I worked as an engineer for 12 years. And I just want to bring that practical problem-solving sort of education-first approach here to Palm Beach. I think we can be doing a lot better than Lois Frankel because she doesn't deliver for us. And I want to really help raise the stature of the district I grew up in, and I want to have it be nice for my daughter who was just born here. So we want to raise her here. We want Palm Beach County to be great.
Thank you, Christian. Reba, could you do the same, please?
Hi, my name is Reba Sherrill, and I've lived in, I came to Palm Beach County 7 years ago from Tennessee, and I love it here. This is my home, and I've established a lot of friends, established my business here, and I'm anxious and ready to work. In fact, I'm already working for the people in District 21. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight.
Thank you, Reba. Mike?
Yes, thank you. I'm Mike Velotti. I'm running for Congress in the 21st District of Florida, like everybody else tonight. I'm an IRS enrolled agent, which basically means I represent people before the Internal Revenue Service. If you need somebody to beat up the IRS, you call me. That's what I do. Before that, I was a federal law enforcement officer for 22 years. I was a 9/11 responder. I was in the Joint Terrorism Task Force. I worked with the United States Secret Service doing dignitary protection. I retired in 2010 in New York, and I came down here to Palm Beach County. And I'm looking to replace Lois Frankel so we could have somebody that'll fight for the people.
Aaron, how are you doing today? Can you do the same, please?
Good. Thank you for having us on this. My name is Aaron Scanlon. I'm also running for District 21 here in Palm Beach County, Florida. I am a retired police officer, hostage negotiator. I was in the United States Air Force for 8 years, where I served my country guarding nuclear weapons for the United States Air Force. I've got a lot of experience dealing with emergency management, and I think we need to completely eradicate Lois from office, as she has done nothing the entire time she's been in office, and we need to put somebody in there who has actually put his life on the line for this country and will do everything he can to fight for this country.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
Hi, I'm Liz Belton, also running for United States Congress in CD 21. I am a mother of 3. I did that for 10 years on my own. I know how to budget. I am also a small business owner here in Palm Beach County. I am both state and federally licensed to engage in the business that I have, and I am very familiar with the red tape that comes along at the state, federal, and local levels, and I'm looking to eliminate some of that for my constituents.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Elizabeth.
At Words Matter Publishing, we believe that every word must be taken into consideration. Whether you're writing a book, crafting a presentation, or developing content for your business, if it's written or spoken, Words Matter Publishing will assist you in saying the right words that will really matter. Our services include author platform development, author websites, book coaching, book reviews, editing, ghostwriting, investigative journalism, and publicity campaigns. We are currently accepting submissions in all genres, and we work very hard to respond to each submission within 2 weeks. We guarantee your submission will never be tossed aside into a slush pile, because we don't have one. Our innovative progressive publishing program is unique to Words Matter Publishing because we developed it to fit the needs of every author. We work with our clients on a personal and professional level that is guaranteed to exceed the industry standard in publishing. In fact, we are available to speak with you by phone, email, text, or Skype. It is our goal to make your literary dreams become a reality. So contact us today to see if your book is ready for our progressive publishing program. Isn't it time you took the next step in your writing career by uniting with a publisher that genuinely cares about your success? Contact us today at Words Matter Publishing, because our words change the world.
I'm going to start with the first question. The first question is for Reba. COVID-19 has shown the world that the pandemic response is extremely difficult. What, if anything, do you believe the U.S. should be learning from the current COVID situation?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
The COVID-19 has shown the world that the pandemic response is extremely difficult. What, if anything, do you believe the U.S. should be learning from the current COVID situation?
Oh, what should we be learning? Well, number one, we need to have real professionals who understand these concepts in place, who are ethical and who actually look out for the needs of the country and the people that live here. We've been, up until recently, had been going off of the information presented by the WHO, and now we have separated from the WHO, and it really cost us trillions of dollars in our budget, and people have been harmed by it. Many people, tens of thousands of people, in fact, have died unnecessarily because we have certain governors who didn't follow guidelines that the administration had put in place to keep the elders safe in the nursing homes. And so we need to make sure that people that are in office will protect our citizens and not cause unnecessary death and hardships on families. There are many people who died alone because they weren't allowing their family and their loved ones near them during their final days. And that's just inhumane treatment. We wouldn't do that to a dog, keep him from his loving family, and yet we did it to our grandparents. And this is just unacceptable. So I think we need to have things in place that are rational and effective. And I think we've learned what things are ineffective throughout this ordeal. And shutting the country down was not a good idea. And we need to get it reopened. And we need to get the people in office that are preventing that from reopening. We need to get them out of office this year so that we can get this engine of our economy roaring again.
Thank you, ma'am. Mike Velarde?
Same question, right?
Yes, same question.
Okay, there's two things. One is you got to have a plan. This should have been planned out a while ago. The Obama administration should have had a plan. What did we do in a pandemic? And two, we got to be prepared to execute that plan. It was obvious neither one of those things took place. We didn't have the plan in place, and we weren't prepared for this, and we should have been.
Elizabeth?
So this is unprecedented, right? We've never had the entire world completely shut down, basically, over a pandemic. And in the beginning, I was on board. You know, when you don't know what you're dealing with, it was a really good idea to shut down, to social distance, do whatever we had to do to avoid spreading a pandemic until we could get a handle on what exactly it was and how it was affecting people. The problem is we're getting a lot of what appears to be inflated numbers. I've seen test results that were positive that at the bottom say, yes, this is a positive result, but please be aware it's not necessarily definitely a COVID-19 positive. It could be one of the other coronaviruses. The common cold, toxoplasmosis is a coronavirus. And we are seeing a real push, or a push to pull away personal freedoms. There are people who cannot wear a mask. There are people who do not want to wear a mask. There are people who want to go back to work. And there seems to be an awful lot of government control at this point, pushing us into a corner. And that corner is getting darker and scarier. At some point, we really need to look at what the long-term economic impact of shutting down is going to be. And will we eventually end up having more damage and more death from the poverty induced by shutting everything down than by a virus that appears to, and believe me, the deaths are still important, but appears to hit mostly people who are immunocompromised and elderly. Perhaps we should be focusing at this point more on protecting those people and getting everybody else back to work.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Christian Acosta.
I mean, obviously, this whole pandemic has been unprecedented for us, but it could happen again to a different extent. Like Liz mentioned, this isn't the first coronavirus. There have been many. Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome was a coronavirus, and that had a much higher fatality rate, but it never left a certain geographic region. So we do need to be prepared. We've got to learn a couple of things. The first thing is, and this has to do with the World Health Organization, we need to make sure that we are relying on information that we trust. The WHO didn't tell everybody, oh, this is a problem for months and months until they finally said, oh, well, maybe it's a problem. They should be the most conservative organization out there when it comes to health. They should be crying, oh, this is going to be terrible, when they don't really think it is, just because that's what we expect a World Health Organization to do. So when they say it's okay and we rely on that, that's a first problem. There needs to be an investigation into what happened at the WHO, and we should withdraw from it, or we should re-enter conditioned on a investigation. We also need to have procedures here that matter. Look at the difference between what Florida did and what New York did. To my knowledge, the governor here said if there is a COVID patient in a nursing home, we're going to send them to a designated place where there are COVID patients, and there's a certain number of COVID patient nursing homes. That way we take infected people out of the nursing homes. New York almost did the exact opposite and sent infected people into nursing homes. I'm not trying to throw shade on New York, but the point is, where is CNN and all the national news talking about which approach is better? Because we better be learning. Right now, all they care about is shifting the blame. We need to learn from that, and we need to have the right procedures for our elderly. And then the other thing is we need to make sure that we're protecting internal transportation. How many people heard about farmers having to kill thousands of pigs and other types of food, and then you had shortages of food in stores and supermarkets? That sounds stupid, and it is. We can fix that problem. COVID doesn't attack truck engines. So we need to make sure that at the very least, when this type of thing happens, we know how to keep stuff open, how to have stores getting food delivered, and that way that we can lessen the impact for the average person. And lastly, we need to be careful with mandates about masks and shutting things down. I just want to point out New York City had all kinds of mandates, and they shut a lot of small businesses down. But I'm pretty sure the New York subway never stopped running. So a bunch of people sardine canned in a train, but you're throwing small businesses out of business. Pick an approach and make it consistent and have some sort of sense to it. What they did not make sense. So we need to learn on procedures, on internal transportation, and first of all, on where we get our information internationally.
Thank you. Aaron Scanlon.
Thank you. I've actually had experience in dealing with emergency management and planning for the unplannable. Part of being working with nuclear weapons with the Air Force, we had to have counterterrorism, we had to have biological terrorism, we had to have plans in place that would allow us to act fast and resourcefully. And what we've failed to do here is not that we didn't have information that we needed to have to begin with. We all know that this has been completely politicized by the left and shutting us down for mainly one reason and one reason only. There are other factors in play that we could have done to not shut businesses down. The plagues that have happened all over the world that have actually affected worldwide populations. the sick people stayed home and the healthy people remained. So we need to factor in everything that occurred so far, change the way things that were implemented, also have the proper information, and trust the people that we get the information from. Obviously, we know now who we can trust and who we can't trust as far as information goes. And we need to make sure that we put people in place that will do what's right for Americans and not what's right for their political party, which is why we need to get these people out of office that are trying to politicize things. And they've said it on video that they need to use this pandemic for their agenda. Mm-hmm. The American people is not for an agenda. I'm tired of listening to people that are only about the American people when it's election time. All the things that have been happening lately, I was a police officer for over 20 years, and I don't recall hearing anything about all of this craziness until it's election time. We need to get people in that are going to care about Americans and actually do what's right. And having the experience to deal with pandemics such as this, I think we can be better prepared for the next time.
Soul Sprints is the story of J.C. Leonard, a local football hero from the small fictional town of Lake Barrow, Florida. J.C. moves back home in 2003 to coach his high school alma mater and brings with him his former college teammate Sol Rashid, who is a Muslim. While Sol's gregarious personality and passion for football and life quickly endear him to the hearts of many in the town, his faith causes controversy in Lake Barrow, which has a checkered past all of its own. As the story unfolds, JC and the hometown he loves will be forced to reconcile their beliefs and history with a future in post-9/11 America. Soul Sprints is a tale of love, friendship, loyalty, and tolerance. Soul Sprints is available now, wherever books are sold.
Thank you. Second question for everybody, starting with, what experience do you have working with multiple agencies with extreme difficulties with emergency management? So, Rita.
Well, I've actually been doing hands-on work in disaster situations. I've worked with tornadoes and hurricanes, floods. So I've been boots on the ground first in communities before the Red Cross even, like immediately after. And a few years ago, actually, in the state of Tennessee, we had something like 43 people were killed by tornadoes that came through our county. And within minutes, literally, my children and I were in our pickup truck, and we were out going through the community and helping the people that had been hit. Devastation, indescribable. And we were able to bring them food and cold water and sunscreen, milk, whatever they needed. Some people had young children, infants, and they didn't have any milk available. So we did that every single day for 6 weeks, out of my own pocket. I paid for everything. And we did get some donations of some food and things, but there was a flood in Beauty, Kentucky one year when I was in high school. I organized a group of 12 students, and we took a week. We went and we shoveled mud out of people's homes. We helped them wash their furniture and clean things up and get things back inside. So I have experience working with both organizations and working independently. And it's one of the things I really take great pride in throughout my life, that I've been active in communities when they're in their most desperate time of need.
Thank you. Mike?
Well, I was a federal law enforcement officer, and when 9/11 hit, I was assigned to the Joint Terrorism Task Force, where I worked with the FBI tracing down every terrorist lead for months. I also had to go to the Staten Island dumps, where we looked through the debris from 9/11 for body parts. So after that, I was assigned to, we all got air marshal training. So anytime that a federal agent was on a plane, the air marshals would leave and those federal agents would act as the air marshals. So I was actively involved when 9/11 hit, in that emergency situation, which it was. To dealing, working with the FBI and other organizations. I mean, ultimately, I was also assigned to the Joint Terrorism, after the Joint Terrorism Task Force, I went to the Drug Task Force, where I work with multiple agencies. We're doing money laundering for the Colombians.
Thank you, Mike.
So part of my state licensing requires a emergency plan. I house about 60 animals on my property, and as soon as we heard that there might be the hint of a lockdown, the facility was prepared for a full year. My facility can go 1 year without food coming in, without other resources coming in. We've prepared the property. The generator, truthfully, would only last about 10 days, but we could do without money coming in, without food coming in, without water coming in on my property for a year solid. A lot of the ability to prepare for that was sitting in seminars with my peers who also own large animal facilities, who had ideas beforehand on what you do for a long-term lockdown. With that, I'd like to remind Palm Beach residents who are listening, we are in hurricane season. We may or may not get locked down again. Please do not wait. And I've said this on my social media before, do not wait for the mainstream news to tell you it's time to stock your house. You want dry goods, you want water, you want everything you think you could need for a couple of months in your house. You want it now, and you don't want to wait for the media to tell you and for the shelves to be empty.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Christian Acosta.
I worked in the nuclear industry as an engineer for about a decade. Whenever you work in the nuclear industry, if you are in a lead position, I was a lead engineer for a lot of projects, you have to interact with the utility, their safety group, your own internal safety group, which is independent, and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which is a national level organization. It's in Rockville, Maryland, and they come and they inspect everything. So every plan you make, every design you make is reviewed. If it's going to have safety implication in a power plant, and then any sort of installation process is reviewed. One of the jobs I did, for example, is we went and we had to install instruments on a actual component inside a reactor. So you've got an open nuclear reactor, and you're sitting on top of it, putting stuff in. That job, I was the lead engineer for the job, and this is just one of the jobs. But I was the lead engineer, and I was actually the shift supervisor, and I worked on the night shift that was doing the installation of some of the components, and that took about a couple weeks. But this one time, you always have emergency situations for if something doesn't go as planned, if something's stuck. We almost dropped a component into the reactor, and then it's very difficult to go fish it out. So all of these things have to be planned in advance. You have to have stop work procedures. You have to have a pre-job brief for everybody. You have to make sure you know what is the requirement that the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, puts on you. So all of that work has to be almost choreographed, and we did that successfully in a number of jobs, and it's very high stress. I mean, there's times where I'm sitting there in a bubble suit, with air being pumped in because I'm in an area that has a lot of radiation and a lot of dust that you don't want to get on you. And, you're sweating, you've been there 8 hours trying to do this work, something goes wrong, and all of a sudden you've got to stop work, have a plan, say, okay, we've got to go out, notify this person, that person, the safety person, they've got to go execute their things, and then we have like 3 hours to go do a recovery plan and then come back and fix it because, oh, by the way, the power plant's on the clock and they're losing money because they're shut down and they don't want to be shut down. So it's a really high stress situation, and since it is safety related, everything in nuclear is safety first. You have the government involved every step of the way if it's going into a power plant because there are certifications on the line. So, I love the work, but it was definitely high stress a lot of the times.
Thank you. Aaron?
For almost 30 years, that's all I did was emergencies after emergencies after emergencies. Working with in the Air Force, I dealt with other countries. I had to work with the personnel of other countries to get our missions to be completed along with theirs as well. When I was a police officer, I worked for multi-agency gang task force. I worked with the DEA, the FBI. I've also worked with the Secret Service. And I've had the experience that I was able to work with multiple individuals with different backgrounds. I've also had the experience of dealing with multiple agencies that have different agendas than what yours is, and to try to get everything to work toward the main goal while you're still being able to let somebody else accomplish their separate goals that they have. Because each time you try to create your action plan, you have to consider the other people involved as well and what their missions are, and try to make it everything to work together as best as possible. As a hostage negotiator, that's all we did. We weren't being called for, for backyard barbecues. We were being called while people were in crisis, and we had to work with SWAT. We had to work with other agencies, and we had to work with not only law enforcement agencies, but we had to work with other agencies, like with when Jerome Golden was still in, mental health agencies and things like that we had to work with. And we all had to make sure that everybody was on the same page. And we had to devise plans and execute those plans that are able to make sure that everybody gets out safe. So for 30 years, that's all I've been doing.
The next question. What is your opinion on the conspiracy theory revolving around elite pedophile rings in power circles? Reba?
So, what do I think about pedophile rings? It's not a theory, it's a reality. We live here in Palm Beach County. Palm Beach County is very famous for one of our residents who lived here, Jeffrey Epstein. He lived just a few blocks from my home here in Palm Beach. So it's not a conspiracy theory, it's a conspiracy reality. We know that Maxwell just got recently arrested, and she's been outing people. Mayfair is another thing that just recently came out the last couple of days. And it's demonstrating how these people that have been in power for a good many decades, even hundreds of years, these lines of people in this cabal have been dealing in humans, like children and adults. And we know that in Haiti that there was an individual that was connected to the Clinton Foundation who was smuggling or attempting to smuggle dozens of children out of Haiti. And we have like last year, I heard there were over 40,000 children a year that would disappear here in the United States. They would be snatched from their homes, snatched from the street, and never to be seen again. I heard a new statistic this past week that it's actually closer to 800,000 a year in the United States. So it's massive amounts of people, whether it's 40,000 or 800,000. Like, just think about all those parents, those families who suddenly have their child disappears and they never see them again. They don't know if they're dead or alive. They don't know what's happening to them. So this is something that we really need to pay attention to, and we need to address. We need to stop this from being able to take place. And I know that during this COVID lockdown over the last 4 months, President Trump has been actively working to round up these pedophiles, these sex rings, and they are being brought to justice. And I'm very pleased with that, and we're going to continue that fight. I'm sure everybody on the panel here would agree that this is something that must be addressed, and be addressed very aggressively.
Thank you, Reba. Mike, can you respond to this?
As a federal agent, when I first began my career back in the late 80s, I had a private investigator come to me with some evidence. He was involved in taking people out of cults, and they gave me a lot of information relating to satanic cults that were involved in this type of activity. My supervisors in the government didn't want me to pursue it because they thought it was outside of my purview, but we put together a case and gave it to NYPD, but I don't think it went anywhere because at the highest levels, you're talking about very powerful people who are able to politically get investigations killed. And as Reba had mentioned, like people like the Clintons, it's a hard thing to investigate because of who you're going after. I will say this. As I started to investigate it myself, there's like a satanic, I know it's going to sound strange. I mean, I wrote a book on Bible prophecy, Mike Velarde books. You can get my book, a little of that's in the book. But there's like a presence, a satanic, I don't know, an oppression. It's weird. You go into some of these places, you can feel the evil. There was one place in particular where the private eye had told me where some of the stuff was going on. And, I went there and it's just, it's like the ultimate evil. That's all I'm going to say and leave it at that.
Thank you, Mike. I can see that's affected you deeply.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, can you respond to this?
Yes, so I mentioned earlier I was a single mom for 10 years. I worked as an adult entertainer for 10 years. And not surprisingly, the people who manage to survive often end up filtering into that business. And unfortunately, the way they tell the story, by the time they're ready to tell their story, they've been put forcibly on drugs. They may have other psychological issues going on, and they don't necessarily come across as believable or somebody that you can put on a stand. I think when there's smoke, there's fire. I think when you look at, as Reba mentioned, we had Jeffrey Epstein here and all of these girls who were hunted, basically taken advantage of because maybe mom and dad weren't both available, or maybe they're, for whatever reason, they were on their own a little bit, maybe had low self-esteem. When you look at what happened in USA Gymnastics, where you had a coach who repeatedly was told on by children that he was sexually abusing, one teammate after the other. I think they ended up with 500 victims over X amount of years. And these are people in power. So it is not unreasonable to believe that people who seek political power are also involved in pedophile circles. I will say that I have confidence that every single person, every one of the 5 candidates on this meeting will do everything they can to uncover that kind of atrocity and try and put people to justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Christian Acosta.
Yeah, thanks. It's terrible. And, Elizabeth is right. This is something we have to do something about. And Mike's right. It's a huge problem. I do think that you're seeing more prosecution, which is good. Mm-hmm. I hope the prosecution continues, and I hope the investigations are actually happening. I know that a lot of our investigators are off chasing political problems right now, and that's part of the issue. From a congressional perspective, I think there's 2 main areas that we can really, really actually make progress. The first one is we need to make sure that if there's any funding for sort of making people's ethical complaints go away, it needs to be yanked. We know that happens with Congress, right? Congress has an actual fund where they've used money from you to make their ethical complaints go away, to settle things. That's BS. It should be out in the public, and you should have to deal with the consequences of your own actions. And plus, you should also have to pay for it, not the taxpayer. So we can get rid of that for sure, and we can get rid of any corollary that exists for any other government official. There should be not a single dollar of taxpayer money anywhere at any level going to help litigate or cover up for an individual's ethical, harassment, whatever it might be, complaint. Okay? That we need to take care of, and we can do that. The second half that I always go to, because it's a topic that we all talk about, but we need to keep reminding people, is border security. Human trafficking is an integral part of feeding a lot of pedophile rings. We know that. Reba mentioned it. The bottom line is we need to always go out and talk to people about the importance of border security, not just as it has to do with immigration, but it has to do with it makes it easier for people to traffic in children. I don't care how much you hate the president or whatever your bent is. You can't tell me that having 0 border guards isn't somehow a benefit for a person trafficking children illegally. You just can't logic that. I'm sorry. There's no magical person that's going to show up on the border and say, well, I'm not here for immigration, but I caught that child trafficker. No, nobody's going to do it. So the bottom line is, if you don't support border security, you are actively making it harder for us to stop child traffickers. And therefore, you're going to support, I'm not saying you personally believe in this, but you're going to indirectly allow pedophile rings to continue, because this is where they feed a lot of their stuff from. Mm-hmm. We have to do something about it. So for me, we need to make sure that ethical complaints aren't on the taxpayer dime, put the people who are making these transgressions up in the spotlight and have them deal with it. And on the other hand, we've got to enforce border law and border security, because that's one of the primary ways to stop human trafficking, especially of children.
Thank you. Aaron?
Thank you. I've actually had experience in dealing with all of this. I work with the multi-agency gang task force with our investigations against MS-13s, one of the biggest human trafficking gangs on the planet. As a persons detective as well, while I dealt with homicides and robberies and crimes against persons, I was also integral in actually be online and portraying myself as an underage individual to try to get these pedophiles behind bars and solicit them, have them solicit me, and make the arrests on that. I worked with the Human Trafficking Coalition of both the Treasure Coast and the Palm Beaches. I'm going to be working with them again on Wednesday to really get the word out, because human trafficking is a very real problem. It's a very serious problem, and it's a multi-billion-dollar a year industry. And it's happening here. It's happening next door. I'll guarantee that you come in contact with at least one person who's either been human trafficked or is involved in human trafficking. Right? It's a serious, serious problem. And I've seen the effects that it's having on the citizens. I've seen the effects that it's had on our economy. And I've seen the effects that it's had on people that are trying to get these people out. And it's a very, very difficult thing. And we need to make it easier for our law enforcement. We need to really support our law enforcement in trying to get these programs that are educational and they help get people out of those situations. Because it's not necessarily somebody that's in a cage. It can be in a multi-million-dollar mansion, just like Epstein's was. Mm-hmm. But people who are in that life, they don't understand how to get out. They don't think they can get out. And the educational programs that the Human Trafficking Coalitions have tried to put on, along with Place of Hope as well, they try to get that education out and try to get the education to the people that actually need it the very, very most. And we need to support our law enforcement. We need to support bills that will actually help secure our borders, make it harder for people to get in instead of easier to get in.
Thank you, Aaron. Just heads up, this morning I was informed by my wife, she's in Russia right now, they're reporting there that 40,000 Germans on a WhatsApp group were arrested this morning in Germany. There's arrests out for them. There's 40,000 of them. That's amazing. That's incredible. 40,000 people. And that
is the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, that's just the tip of the iceberg. 40,000.
I assume that's in relation to a suspected pedophile ring.
Pedophile
right?
ring. That's exactly right. They are actually chasing them down right now. Unbelievable.
In a town just like yours, Avi is waking up to start his day. And boom! No matter what he does, it isn't right. No one has anything nice to say. Deep down, he knows how to have a great day, but those darn grown-ups keep messing it up. He wishes he could turn things around, but he doesn't know how. Finally, he surrenders and gives up. Help arrives, and a surprising answer comes. He dreams about a way to make everyone happy and grow into their greatness. But can he teach his parents to see him and themselves in a new light? Will they be able to appreciate his newfound wisdom? Find out in the Greatness Chair.
Won't you open that door? Welcome into my life. Please, please. Oh, please.
All right, guys. Question 4. What will you do as a congressman or woman to improve our police departments and root out the bad cops? Reba.
Well, I mean, first off, we need to pay attention when we have complaints. So oftentimes in local police departments, the Good Old Boys Club is active and they cover it up and they don't bring it out into the fore. I think we should have some citizen groups that monitor these kinds of complaints and make sure that they follow up and see that they are being addressed appropriately. When a police officer breaks the law, when he is hurting citizens, they need to be held to account, just like any other criminal. I've heard stories for decades now about women being pulled over for speeding, for instance, and they're raped by the cop, you know? Of course, we have some people that are murdered. They use undue force, or they have a health issue and they refuse to get them medical assistance when they ask for it. So there's a lot of different situations that we could encounter, but we need some kind of an organized way to monitor the response. And training is also important. I heard it said years ago that they often will try to pick a person to be a police officer with a low IQ because they're controllable. I don't know if that's true or not, but I've met a lot of cops. A lot of my law enforcement officers that I'm friends with are highly intelligent individuals. And I think we need to make sure that they receive adequate training. And I think that they do for the most part. Maybe there's like localized pockets around the country where they don't have the funding. But we could do some education online. You know, we've done a lot of other things online since this COVID thing happened. So I think we need to make it available to all.
Thank you, Reba. Mike, what's your thoughts on this man?
Well, there's 3 things that need to be done. First is better screening, because you want to make sure the person you're giving the job to is capable of doing it. Currently, a lot of police departments use EEO, in other words, equal employment opportunity, where they sometimes will let people slide, and that can't happen. We need the absolute best people to be our police officers, because one bad cop, just one, can destroy an entire police force, and as you've seen, entire cities. So we can't have that. The second thing is training. You need more better defensive tactics training. It seems like these cops aren't trained well in de-escalating a situation. As most of you know, Cindy and Christina, who both, helping me on my campaign, and Liz knows this better than anybody, and so does Reba, were arrested when they should never have been arrested. That's bad training as far as what the police are taught. So I would give federal funding to make sure that they get federal training, like I got as a federal law enforcement officer when it comes to defensive tactics. And secondly, to judgment pistol shooting. We don't need any bad cops out there shooting people they shouldn't be shooting. Now, there happens to be a machine. It's called a FATS machine. It's a firearms training system. What it is, basically, it's a standalone system that goes in a room. And in that room, you have a screen like a movie screen. And they will play scenario after scenario. They give you a gun. It's a laser gun, but it's interactive. So when you shoot at the screen, it shows you exactly where you shot when. If you miss the guy's shooting back at you. And you have this interaction. And it's good shoot, bad shoot scenario, time and time again. If you don't have 100% judgment, you don't get to keep your gun. The cops don't have those systems, and they need that system so that we don't have a situation like we had on I-95 where some poor black guy got shot at 3 a.m. by a cop who didn't use good judgment. Thirdly, I think, and this is my own thoughts, of course, but I think Internal Affairs needs to start doing some undercover investigations. If you had a cop like Derek Chavez, who killed George Floyd, he had 18 prior complaints against him. I think if you get 1 or 2 prior complaints and they start to see you're a problem, maybe they do an undercover investigation. They send somebody out there who's really a cop, and when the bad cop goes after him, they come in, arrest him, take him down, he's done.
Thank you, Mike. Elizabeth?
So there's floating around the internet, where we go one, where we go all, which on a side note is true for this group. We have all pretty much agreed that we would lend our knowledge when needed, should, depending on who ends up in office. I would probably be calling Mike. Mike and I have actually talked about this a lot, so there's not much I'm going to reiterate that he hasn't already said. I would definitely talk to Aaron. Sometimes you have to know what's outside your area of expertise and know how to find an expert in that area. I agree with Mike. You need more training. I think we need to work on renegotiating the contracts for police so that an officer is able to say, hey, this guy's not doing his job right, or this guy's dangerous, or this guy's a problem, without feeling that if he goes out to work the next day and his life is in danger or her life is in danger, they're not going to get back up. Because for the few people I did reach out to question and get some feedback on, that's what I got, is there's a legitimate fear that if you do the right thing and, tell out a bad cop, that you're not going to get back up. So that's, I think the contracts are the one thing that Mike didn't mention. Everything else I would agree with as far as the training.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thanks.
Aaron?
Being in that position, I can tell you right now that more training is probably nearly impossible. The amount of training that we get every single day, every single month on diversity techniques, trying to de-escalate techniques, defense and arrest tactics. Police departments do have the FATS machine. I've used them myself. There are plenty of training that goes on. As far as the complaint system goes, one of the things that I'm opposed on that the Democrats are trying to do is this complaint system to put them on a national registry. Again, we get sent to places that nobody wants to go. We take people to jail. Nobody wants to go to jail. And their friends and families don't appreciate it very much. So they complain on the officer. They say they're rude. They say this. They say that. So now you're going to have an officer who's actually doing his job and doing it properly and correctly. And you're going to put them on a registry because, well, they had 6 complaints on him. He must be a bad cop because he's got 6 complaints. Or he made 6 arrests that people didn't really enjoy and didn't want to do, and they complained on him. I've had people use false complaints before. Everybody's got a body camera now. Everybody's got a camera in their patrol car. So when these complaints come in, they still have to be logged as a complaint, but they're handled because they're on video. It's really hard to articulate that this officer was doing something inappropriately when it's on video. Problem with video is, though, you have to take into consideration the different angles that there are. Because if you're seeing something at one angle, it completely looks differently from somebody else's angle. So having more training, there's so much training that these officers go through. I've been through it myself. I've got volumes and volumes of books that are inches thick about the training that we've had over and over and over again. There's just not enough time in the day to put police officers to work and to get them even more training than what they already have. They have plenty of training. What we need to do is we need to stop hiring people just because they're trying to fit a quota with something else. When I got hired, I was put on the white male list. Then there was another list that was there, and it was called the minority list. Well, the minority list consisted of everything that wasn't a white guy. And to me, that kind of sounds like that's the minority. If one list is everybody that's not a white male. That kind of thing shouldn't happen. Mm-hmm. We go through testing. We go through psychological testing. We go through background checks, extensive background checks. The city of Milwaukee talked to people that I went to grade school with and junior high school with. So there's a lot that happens that people don't know and people don't understand, but there's a lot in place to stop this. Now, is there a problem? There's a problem in about 1% of the people that are out there, not even 1%. But what we have to do is we have to put things into perspective. you're not going to be able to stop every single bad apple in any job. No matter how hard you try, there's going to be somebody that slips through the cracks. And instead of blowing it way out of proportion that there's been this thing forever, it's time to come back and face reality and actually do things that are proactive instead of knee-jerk reaction, reactive, that really don't make any sense.
Thank you, Aaron. Christian, sorry about that.
No problem. First off, I want to say, and exactly what Aaron was mentioning, I don't know the exact number, but there's 3+ million police officers in this country. So we're talking about a very, very, very small number of police officers who are not doing their job properly. The rest of them are doing good jobs for the communities they love. So we do need to keep that in perspective. The part that I think we can improve is, look, bias and racism is a national issue, but it doesn't happen at a national level. It happens everywhere at a local level. The specific people and specific departments involved are the ones who tell that story. In Minneapolis, they did have a number of officers who had questionable issues that occurred in their history. They had an internal review process. They had a district attorney. They all had chances to review things, and they didn't do it. That officer was using a technique that isn't taught to anybody. To my knowledge, you are never taught that the proper way to subdue someone is to put pressure on their neck. From my knowledge, and I spoke with the department here in Palm Beach County, you're supposed to put pressure between their shoulder blades on their back until they're handcuffs, but never on the neck. If you remember, there's a gentleman in New York who died from a rear chokehold. That chokehold, after that gentleman died, he asphyxiated to, I think, either that or a related heart attack. That chokehold was removed as a process in virtually every single police department. So this guy is clearly doing stuff outside of his training. So the question is, why isn't he disciplined? Well, that is a local problem, and clearly the local situation did not work. I support what Senator Scott, who's a Republican, recently proposed in the Senate, which is that there has to be some way of reviewing if officers have specifically excessive force violations, not other citations, specifically excessive force violations where the investigation finds that there is some sort of issue. And if this flags multiple times, then there has to be some sort of action, because Minneapolis did not do what they needed to do. They had an officer who did violate procedure. That's not a debate, and nothing happened to him. So it clearly wasn't sufficient for them to continue whatever culture they had there of lax review. That does need to be beefed up. It needs to be beefed up in a way that is not obtrusive, that does not put people on lists simply because they got a citation. But we do need to be worried about excessive use of force, because that's what does lead to fatalities. And we do need to do something to stop it. I think that Senator Scott's bill was very good. Obviously, it got stopped for political reasons, but I would support it if I was able to in the House. If it came to the House, I would vote in favor of his recent bill.
Happiness is on the way, and Dr. Susan Highsmith is sharing the steps you must take to protect your baby's future in her best-selling book, The Renaissance of Birth, which is available now at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Walmart.com.
Thank you. Here we go for question number 5. How do we combat fraud and corruption in the government and business? And I would like to add to that question, and it came from one of you. They go to the politicians and pander to them. What do they call these people?
Lobbyists.
Yes, these lobbyists. Can you comment, Reba?
Well, I tell you, fraud and corruption is in every corner of our life. You know, you can find the crumbs everywhere. I think that lobbyists are one of the biggest problems we have in Congress, because they get laws written to benefit the corporations and these entities, and they're ignoring the needs of the people. We, the people, are the ones in charge. The government is supposed to serve us, not the other way around. And because of money, big time money being involved, it's gotten flipped. And always with fraud and corruption, all you have to do is follow that money trail, and it'll bring you right to the source of the problem. So, like I was saying, in every aspect of life, we've got this fraud and corruption, whether it be with the police, like they may plant drugs on someone, they may take things out of the lock room where they have guns or drugs, and they'll sell them or whatever. In the medical profession, we have doctors that take kickbacks. We have people that sell drugs under the table or even take them themselves. We have human trafficking. The probate court is rife with that all over the country. And that's a multi-billion-dollar a year industry where they are stealing people's wealth, and they drug them, and they take their homes, their cars, their personal assets. We've had a lot of problems with the veterans, and the president's been working hard to clean that up. So now we have some recourse there. We need to address these other areas. Of course, we've already discussed the human trafficking across the southern border. We have the problems with the pharmaceutical companies, big ag, big pharma. These industries have a revolving door between the corporations and the government. And a lot of money gets exchanged there. A lot of people have made a lot of money in Congress by this insider trading. A lot of people have gained billions of dollars since COVID started, the lockdown back in March. Bill Gates, his wealth, his bottom line has increased by tens of billions of dollars in the last 4 months. Like, that shouldn't be. These hospitals, the Congress set up this so that the hospitals and the nursing homes can collect tens of thousands of dollars per patient that is diagnosed with COVID-19. And so it gives them a financial incentive. And trust me, some of these governors have taken advantage of that to try to help their budget. They're bringing in money to the coffers. $37,000 if you get put on a ventilator. Most of these people didn't need to be on a ventilator, but they're getting these kickbacks, and they've been reimbursed at 100%. That's unheard of. Like Medicare, they typically reimburse a small percentage of the cost that gets billed. Now they get 100%. So they are inflating their numbers. They're stealing that money from the taxpayers, and it should have never been done this way. But this is what we need to address. We need to do investigations, and we need to hold these people to account for taking advantage of our treasury.
Thank you, Reba. Mike, what are your thoughts on this matter?
Well, there are three things that need to be done to limit fraud and corruption. The first thing is term limits. That's why I'm a big supporter of term limits. The reason people go into politics is so they can make themselves wealthy. A lot of times, not us, most others, that we see in there, it's about the power. And they stay in there forever, and they build an empire. We see it with Nancy Pelosi. We see it with Mitch McConnell. Doesn't matter. These people stay there far too long. Why? Because they're receiving a benefit for what they're doing. So that's the first thing we got to do, is limit the time they can stay there. The second thing we need to do is shrink the size of our government. Our government has gotten totally out of control. And the larger the government is, the more power you give to the politicians. So why don't we shrink that size, give the politicians less power, and bring our government, make it a lot smaller, the way it was intended, like by our founding fathers. And the third thing I think that's necessary is, just like the Federal Election Committee caps the amount of money a single contributor can give to an election at $2,800, I think there should be a cap on the total amount a campaign can receive. So if you're going to run for Congress, let's say we cap it at $1 million. What happens then? Then you take away the incentive for the politician to go after money, or to be willing to do something for you. Hey, I'll give you this contract. You put, funnel $1 million, $2 million into my coffers. So those would be the three things I would suggest.
Thank you, Mike. Elizabeth?
Florida Man. The media has a really good time with Florida Man and what's Florida Man up to. And, we're the butt of a lot of jokes because of Florida Man. I love Florida Man. It's not that there isn't a New York man and a New Jersey man and, a Texas man. It's that in Florida we have the Sunshine Law, which means that every correspondence is a public record. So every email that goes back and forth to a representative is public record. You can find that. If a lobbyist writes an email to your representative, you have access to that. We should be doing that on a federal level. Everything that the government does should be watched by us because they work for us, right? So if I work as a representative, I should be completely accountable to the people I represent. Lost my train of thought for a second. So visibility, and also on the internet, I have a very hard time understanding why with technology at the level we're at today, we don't have close to the ability to trace where your tax dollars go all the way up to the federal level and coming back down to programs. That should be a searchable database that you can see where your money goes. The way it is right now, we pour a lot of money into taxes and some of it just kind of, where is it? So, and I agree with Mike that we should definitely shrink the government and make what they're doing much more visible.
Yes. Thank you, Elizabeth. Christian Acosta?
Corruption is a really difficult topic. It's really big, but at the core of all corruption is lack of transparency. Corruption only gets to grow when people can't see what you're doing. And that's something that we've echoed here, but that has to be at the core of everything we do. When we have 1,000-page bills being passed, most people can't read them, and you get all kinds of stuff. And remember, the Affordable Care Act was a multi-thousand-page bill. And it was written mostly by healthcare industry lobbyists or health insurance industry lobbyists. That's a huge problem. When you have agencies that you have no idea what they do, you don't elect their people, a whole bunch of bureaucrats work there, and you never really know what they're up to, that's a problem. So we need to support transparency everywhere possible. I also have signed the term limit pledge. I'm 100% behind term limits. I will be glad to term myself out by signing the document, no problem. But we also need to make sure that anytime there is an agency or board or bureau created by the government, that it has a sunset. There should be no new permanent agencies created. They should all have a sunset. And if you want to re-extend it, it has to come up for a vote and you have to be in the camera saying, I support doing this for another 2 years. We don't have that many sunset clauses on a lot of our laws and a lot of our agencies, and we should. I also think one of the things we can do, which we've started, is decentralize some of the agencies in DC. It would be nice to be able to shrink the government. I would try and do that in any way I can without hurting the core purpose of whatever the agency is supposed to do. But we can also move them farther away. We can have the government agencies that, for example, Department of the Interior, right? That should be closer to some of the national parks and other things that they actually monitor. I believe the Trump administration is trying to do some of that. But the more agencies that are located closer to their core constituency or core geographical region, the less you're going to be able to have the DC swamp sort of feed off itself and be corrupt. So we need to increase transparency. We definitely need term limits. I think we need to sunset any sort of spending increase or any sort of new agency or board that's created. That way, if you want to continue it, you have to stand up and explain why it should be continued. And we should try and have agencies decentralized a little bit more so that they're closer to the people and farther away from Washington.
Thank you, Christian. Aaron?
Thank you. Part of the problem is prosecution. When you can have all the laws in the world, but when you're not prosecuting those laws, it really doesn't matter that you have a law in place. So when you're talking about corruption, when you do find corruption and you do have these investigations that go on, because there are investigations that go on behind the scenes that nobody knows about. And when you have these investigations that go on and they come up with, like Hillary Clinton's emails, that was a flagrant violation of the law. She should be arrested, period. Where's the incentive to not do something wrong when you see that it happens at the highest part of our government, that people are proven that they've done something illegal and nothing happens to them? So How is that? How are we supposed to keep somebody else in check when we're not keeping our own selves in check? So the prosecution is a very, very big part of the corruption problem. And when you're talking about decentralizing government and making it smaller, which I'm all for, we need to take what we have and evaluate where we're putting our resources. Is where we're putting our resources really doing what it's supposed to be doing? We make trillions of dollars a year in taxes. This government takes in trillions of dollars a year. And we give money to places that don't do what they say they're going to do. But yet we continue to give them money over and over and over again. And then they ask for more money. And we give them more money to do things that they're not doing. We need to take those and take that money and distribute it to other places that are actually using the money for good. If I'm giving, say, Christian, $1 million for his biological research, and he's supposed to produce me, X amount of whatever, and he doubles his production with $1 million, and then I give another $1 million to Liz, and she doesn't give me half of what she's supposed to give me, and she wants more money. Well, I'm going to take money from Liz and give it to Christian because he's shown me that he can work and exceed his expectations with what I give him. So why continue to give money to Liz when she's not doing what she needed to do to begin with, and then give her even more money? It makes no sense.
Yes. Thank you, Aaron. So with that, I've always said that if the law does not prevail, you have no law. Simple as that. If we do not prosecute these people, they will get away with it and continue with it all the time.
Chloe didn't think anything could be harder than mourning the loss of a loved one, until she found herself mourning the loss of a loved one that was still very much alive. Pete's sudden departure from their marriage had come as a complete surprise to her. But the surprises didn't end there. She was certain he would come back. After all, he had the children to consider. But an impromptu photograph on a social networking site of him standing arm in arm with a bronzed bimbo told a different story altogether. If she had been honest with herself, she would have realized her marriage was falling apart long before he left. Leaving her was one thing, but blatantly flaunting his new mistress for everyone to see was rubbing salt in the wounds. She had been in denial, but now she was angry, and she wanted revenge. Revenge didn't involve hurting Pete physically. Revenge was about finding a new love and proving she could be a good wife and have a successful career at the same time. When a random pop-up advertising an online dating service caught her eye, Chloe impulsively signed up and embarked on a journey to find her soulmate. Although a natural risk taker, she also wears her heart on her sleeve, which exposes her extreme vulnerability. And it isn't long before she is forced to question her own judgment. When she eventually meets Mel, she believes she has finally met her first true love. But will he turn out to be her happy ever after? Plenty More Fish pushes the boundaries as it follows the main character, Chloe, through the dark and sometimes humorous side of internet dating. As she delves into deeper waters, her naivete and complete loss of all rationale become more evident as she risks everything in her desperate quest to find love. Get your copy today at Barnes & Noble or Amazon.
So my last question is a question that is close to my constant heart, and that's South Africa. So, the United States has given South Africa close to $10 billion in aid. They have voted over 99% against us in the UN every time. They have Chinese military bases in South Africa and Russian bases now in South Africa. They're also taking Chinese goods and shipping them through the ports to violate the trade agreement with China because they don't have to pay the tariffs. They have training camps in that country for ISIS, Hamas, and Al-Qaeda. They are violating the AGOA agreement that the United States signed with them, which is that you cannot violate people's property rights. So they are taking land without compensation from the white minorities, and they are literally slaughtering them daily. And there's a complete and utter denial going on. And yet our ambassador in South Africa gave them another further 8 billion rand for this COVID-19 aid assistance, only to deny. The government basically openly stated they will not supply any white people in that country with aid. They were going into places and taking the aid away from them, arresting people too. Why are we aiding and abetting these countries typically like this? The same country actually in Venezuela, their ambassador from South Africa declared that he would assist Venezuela in a war against the United States. Why are we helping them? What will you guys do if you get into Congress to stop this type of thing? Reba.
Well, this is a subject that's very dear to my heart. I have a lot of friends in South Africa, and I talk to them on a near daily basis. And it's horrendous what's happening. A lot of money has been thrown at the government, and they use it for their own selfish reasons, whether it's to buy a mansion, a very luxurious car, an airplane, or whatever. And the people are suffering. And it's reverse racism. You know, we talk about that there's racism involving blacks here in the United States. Over in South Africa, it's the whites that are being slaughtered on a daily basis. And there's actually laws in place where the whites can't even go and get food. Like they're literally starving to death. And they have no recourse. I have some friends that are desperate to get out of South Africa, and they want to come to the United States. And it doesn't seem like our government is doing what needs to take place so that they can escape. Right now, there is a lawsuit that's pending to try to help open those doors. South Africa has in place a certain type of status with the United Nations where it's considered a safe haven. And so is the United States. But South Africa, you know, they shouldn't be considered a friendly country when they're doing these things to their citizens. And a lot of people don't understand the background and the history of how the whites came to South Africa, but it was hundreds of years ago. And they actually built these cities and these towns. And when they killed the farmers, then who's growing the food? So there's a lot of problems with hunger in South Africa. We need to stop just paying money to this country. We don't need to be funding their corruption there, just like so many other countries. We don't need to be just sending money there. We need to actually put things in place that are protecting the people. We need to assist them in gaining their independence from this corruption, freeing them from this oppression. I think those are the things we need to concentrate on. And when we send actual food aid there, we need to protect it until it gets into the hands of the people that need it. Don't just send it to the city on a plane and drop it off, because it's not getting through to the people that have hungry children to feed.
Thank you, Eva. Mike?
There's three things that need to happen here. First, we need to expose what's going on in South Africa, because a lot of people don't know what's going on. It's not on the mainstream media. Nobody knows about it. Why? It doesn't fit the narrative of the mainstream media. This kind of reverse discrimination, as Reba had mentioned, doesn't fit their narrative. They don't care. That's the first thing. The second thing, we need to cut off the money, plain and simple. We have financial problems here in this country. We have a deficit that's out of control. We are $20 trillion in debt. It's unheard of. I remember when the government in 1979, for the very first time in the history of the United States, cracked $1 trillion in debt. And now we're more than 20 times that. President Obama himself added $12 trillion to the debt. So we have a serious financial problem. We're a nation teetering on bankruptcy. So we don't need to be sending money to anybody else. We need to be taking care of our citizens. If we're going to spend money on somebody, let's spend it on on the elderly and give them tax-free Social Security like I advocate for. And third thing we need to do is offer political asylum to those that are being persecuted by unjust governments like South Africa.
Thank you, Mike. Elizabeth?
So going back to the Sunshine Law, all that money should be traceable. There should be somebody on the other end that is accountable and marking off this much money went for here, this much money went for that. If I give Mike tens of millions of dollars and he can show where all the money went and that it was appropriately filtered, and we have some reason that we're getting something from, Mike's country that, we want to keep giving them aid, fine. If I give Aaron tens of millions of dollars and he ends up with a mansion and hot cars and his constituents are getting none of it, with Mike, we cut him off. I don't think, I don't think waiting on this one until one of us gets into an office is a good idea. I know I will be happy to try to make an appointment with Lois Frankel, even if it's over the phone, so that at least she can't say she doesn't know. We should definitely call this to her attention now, and I'm happy to do it with all of my my fellow campaign people running for CD21. I'd love if all of us could go down and call this to her attention. Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Elizabeth. Christian?
What's happening in South Africa is despicable. And you're right, it happens in many places, not exactly the same way, but there's a lot of corruption. We give a lot of money to a lot of different countries, and I would, generally speaking, reduce or eliminate the money we're giving out, as well as reduce or eliminate our military presence in many countries. We have military presence of some amount in like 100 countries. The bottom line is this all comes down to a Cold War mentality. I know this from like half my family's from Argentina. And almost all of the United States involvement in South America has always been as using the local country in a pawn in a greater sort of global conflict. It used to be communism, right? USSR, we need to make sure people are on our side, not on theirs. In other words, it's not really respecting the local country. It's saying, well, the way we deal with you has to do with how we're dealing with the USSR. We don't need to do that anymore. Now we do have a competitor in China that we need to worry about, but we can compete with China directly. It makes no sense to be organizing a whole bunch of other countries as pawns against China, and then we have the worst trade policies directly with China and send them tons of money, and it's counterproductive. We need to make sure that every single time we're dealing with a country, it's a true bilateral negotiation. If we give money to South Africa, it should be because they're doing things that help us or that we agree with, not because we want to keep them from helping China. That, to me, is old-fashioned thinking, and we have a lot of people in Washington who still think that way. They still think in the Cold War mentality. Many of them still think about containing Russia too. Like, they literally are stuck in the past. And the problem is the amount of money they spend being stuck in the past is in the hundreds of billions a year. We could be lowering our deficit if we weren't sending all of this money overseas to do what? Fight an inefficient war against China, which we're losing economically anyway? Or to do what? Fight a war to box in Russia when Europe is buying all the natural gas, which, so they're dependent anyway. It, to me, is just idiosyncratic. It's old school thinking that we need to stop. The way we deal with South Africa should be based on our relations with them, their relations with us, and the way we treat each other, period. Not based on how they're dealing with China, because as you've already mentioned, they're dealing with China in ways that we wouldn't support anyway. So I would cut all of their aid immediately because they're not meeting any criteria of respect between nations. We need to make sure that we almost need a new wave of State Department officials and a new wave of diplomats who are making decisions based on how does your country interact with the United States, how do we value democratic ideals, and that's it. It should have nothing to do with whether China's buying ports in your country or not, because that's a huge thing that we always think about. It needs to be bilateral. We need to deal with China directly. We need to deal with Russia directly, anybody else that we perceive as a competitor, and we need to stop using third-party countries as pawns, because what happens is then we start overlooking corruption and we start overlooking unethical behavior, and that's unacceptable.
Thank you. Aaron?
As I said before, it's all borders on accountability. You need to show or prove that you're doing what you're asking us money for. If you're not doing what you say you're supposed to be doing, and especially down there in South Africa, that, and my personal take, I hate the word reverse racism. I think that in itself is a ridiculous word. Racism is racism. It doesn't matter who it's against, white, black, Hispanic, Asian, it doesn't matter. Racism is racism, period. There's no reverse racism because it's against a white person. It's racism. That's just my personal thoughts. Sorry. But you have to take accountability. If there's no accountability for anything that we do or places that we send things to, make no mistake, China is our biggest problem. It's our biggest threat to our economy. It's our biggest threat to our safety. It's the biggest threat to our security. China is our biggest problem. Some of us that's not here today think that it's big tech. We all know that there's a little bit more going on than just her political war with big tech. While yes, the First Amendment and big tech is a problem, it's not the end-all be-all for our Congress here, our constituents here in District 21. But we need to ensure that wherever we send money to, wherever we put boots on the ground, that they're upholding what our country stands for. We don't have to make them into our country. We don't have to change their beliefs or anything, but they should be in line with what our beliefs are. And they should be in line with what we see ourselves in the future. Most of the stuff that we do, when I did in the military, our bases are strategically placed, not just for, the Cold War, but they're strategically placed there for a purpose. Mm-hmm. A lot of it is, unfortunately, you have a lot of corruption in these smaller governments in these small countries because they don't have accountability and they run with the iron fist. They say you will die if you do not do what we tell you you're going to do. And that's why you have the coups in Venezuela. And that's why when Ortega got reelected in Nicaragua, you'll have all of these things with Chavez and in Venezuela, that they're running the countries the way they want to run them because of strictly fear. And if we're giving money to those countries and they're, antagonizing their own people and committing genocide, then we need to stop and we need to pull the funding, period. Without the money, they're going to come to agreement with something, and we need to be forceful about it. And we need to make sure that we are the world's police. We are the strongest nation in the world. We are the big brother of the world, and we need to make sure that we uphold to that, and we need to make sure that we continue to provide that security for people that need it.
Thank you very much, Aaron.
Hi, I'm Tammy, the CEO of Words Matter Publishing, and I'm here to tell you that at Words Matter Publishing, we do things a little bit different. We work closely with new authors that other publishing houses won't even consider. We offer book coaching services that will help you write or polish your book for professional publishing. Award-winning cover designers will create a custom cover in full color for your book that is genre specific. Our interior design team uses state-of-the-art software that will design the interior of your book in accordance with industry standards. We then place your book into our massive distribution network that is over 40,000 retailers, including Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Next step is we place your book on the gold shelf in an ever-increasing list of retail stores. Arrange book signings for you at Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, and everywhere that the gold shelf is. We'll also write and distribute a press release about your book. Our web design team will create a custom designed website for you to launch your author platform. We will present your book to readers at every WMP event. We'll provide social media guidance to help you grow your author platform and connect with your readers. That's not enough, we will even place commercials about your book on television. Words Matter Publishing has been dubbed the People's Publisher, and that's a title I'm pretty proud of because at Words Matter Publishing, we do things a little bit different. When you are facing the first blank page of a new manuscript, you need a book coach to help you write a great one. To discover the perfect coach for you, contact wordsmatterpublishing.com.
So guys, I'm gonna go one by one, and we'll do a last few words on what's your thoughts and close this debate. Thank you very much anyway. Reba, you go first.
First off, I would like to invite everyone in District 21 to please go to my website, rebaforcongress.com. Look at my platform, scrutinize it. I'm fighting for you. I'm not in this for selfish reasons. I'm in it because we need to save our country. I'm a true patriot. I won't be intimidated by lobbyists or the deep state. Can't be bought. I'm fighting for you. That's what matters to me. I care about your families. I care about this country, and I care about this world. I'm a voice for the voiceless. We need to seek justice for all the tyranny that's been going on over the past decades in this country. We need to restore our nation. We need to heal our land. We need revival of our constituents. People need to get involved. Please properly vet all candidates and choose the one that you think can stand up and fight for you in Congress, in DC, where the swamp is deep. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Reba. Mike?
Well, first, before I talk about myself, I want to just comment about the group we have here. What I'd like to say is two things. One, I think every one of us that's here today is amply more qualified than the one person who's not, and that's Laura Loomer. Laura Loomer, nice girl, but she doesn't respond. She has no sense of responsibility, and I don't care how much she gets her name out there. People need to realize that we live in a time where we need somebody that's competent, somebody that has experience, somebody that can get the job done, somebody that has life experience that doesn't include handcuffing themselves to Twitter and crying about losing their Twitter account. That's not enough. I'm sorry to say that. And secondly, I want to say that any one of us would be amply better than Lois Frankel, who's been in there 8 years and, in my opinion, hasn't done too much. The only time I hear about Lois is 6 months before election time. So if you're voting in District 21, I ask that you please consider one of us, and now I'll make the case why you should consider me, of course. We are in a country in crisis. We're politically and socially divided. It's imperative to have a congressional representative who will bring unity and solutions. Without exception, my solutions aim to bring unity to Congress and to our citizens. We all agree that it's unfair to our senior citizens to double tax their Social Security, which is currently happening. I think we can all agree that term limits are absolutely necessary to reduce political corruption in Washington. And I would definitely put that on the House floor to get that passed. The unemployed need as much help as possible, and making their tax benefits tax-free would definitely help them. Because currently, especially now with COVID-19, and the fact that the government is giving you an extra $600 on unemployment benefits, what people don't know is that that is taxable. And the IRS is going to come calling at the end of the year, and they're going to want a piece of it. Well, these poor people have spent that money on their bills, are not going to have anything left, and the last thing they need is some IRS agent that's going to come seize their bank account. Okay? So we need a fighter in Palm Beach that will serve our constituents and help people like you and me. And I'm the man for that job because I've spent my career fighting. I fight the IRS for a living. That's what I do. I'm very good at it. And before that, I was out there fighting the criminals, whether it be the drug dealers or the terrorists. That's what I did. So I encourage you to learn more about my website and my platform by going to velarde2020.com. I ask that you read the testimonials of all those that I've already helped at winningtaxsolutions.com. And finally, I ask that you check out my book, which can be found at MikeVelardeBooks.com. So get it right, vote for Mike, and that's my pitch.
Thank you, Mike. Elizabeth?
Really like the people I'm running against. Truth be told, in a perfect Republican district, I would have probably dropped out long ago and gotten behind one of them. We are not in a Republican district. We're in a heavily liberal district. And I do believe that it doesn't do any good to win the primary if you can't win the general. And I think for many reasons, the very fine people I'm running against in the primary might not have the ability to go up against Lois as hard as I can. I am in a unique position as somebody who was a single mother where the left would have painted me as a victim and would have thought, well, she needs programs and she needs help and she can't do it. And I had no, child support either. I kind of did what I had to do. And I'm in a unique position once I get past the primary to reach over to the left and show people who have been painted victims by their party, there's a whole other way. And it's a better way. And it's a way that, 10 years from now, you can be in a much better place than you are today. And that's why I feel I would be the person to vote for in the primary. That said, again, I love the people that I'm running against. I've had a lot of great conversations. I'm pretty sure most of them will be personal friends, no matter who wins after. And to reiterate what Reba said, do your homework. Visit all of our web pages. Look at who we are, what we stand for, and make sure you're voting for somebody who is going to take what is most important to you to DC. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Christian?
All right. First off, thank you very much to Craig for hosting this. All of these forum opportunities are really important for us. And thank you to every single other candidate here, because you guys have guts to show up and put your voice and your words out there so people know where you stand. If somebody doesn't want to place their words out there so that you don't know where they stand, you should wonder why they don't want to do that. It's very important. But my name is Christian Acosta. I hope you guys had a good time listening to us. The bottom line for me is I believe I'm best positioned to win this district against Lois Frankel because I'm a problem solver. I'm an engineer. That's what I've done all my life. And I think the way to get through to people in this district is to say, look, I know you're not that political. I want to vote. I want your vote because I can help you. I can fix some of our economic problems. I can support small businesses in ways that haven't happened before. I can bring businesses to this district in a way Lois Frankel doesn't even try to do. I can benefit education. I teach in this district. I know how to really get traction on school choice, on vouchers so that you can send your child to any institution you want, on vocational education, on helping our community colleges that offer low-cost education and transition to university if that's what you want. These are the things that will really help you and your family, and that's what your representative should be doing and what Lois Frankel has failed to do in 8 years. So I can put these solutions together. I can help you. I can help your family. I can help you achieve the dreams you already have. And that's the real reason that I want to run, and it's the reason I think I'm the best person for the job. But as everybody said, please do your homework on everyone. My website is voteacosta.com, and if you please go ahead, take a look at it. All my positions are there. You can also find me on Facebook, send a comment, subscribe, like, let me know what you want to talk about, and we'll try and get back to you as soon as possible because I want everybody to know where I stand on the issues, just like everybody else does here. Make the best decision that you can, but if you're willing to give me your support, I'd be honored. Christian Acosta for Florida District 21. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Aaron?
Thanks, Huck. Thanks for having us on today. I appreciate the time that you've given us. You didn't have to do that, and we appreciate it. As far as me goes, I've 30 years. All I can say is that for 30 years, I dedicated my life, literally, put my life on the line for this country each and every single day for 30 years. And what bothered me most and what really caused me to start running is that people on the left, including Lois, tried to turn this country into things that my entire family, from my grandfather in World War II, my father in Vietnam, my uncles in Vietnam, and myself and my cousin in Desert Storm fought to protect and fought to keep. People come to this country for that reason, not for any other reason that they're trying to turn this country into. I have a clear path to victory against Lois. I'm a hostage negotiator. I've had the ability to talk to people that are in crisis and not thinking rationally. I've also had people being able to bring completely different perspectives together on a common goal. And that's what we need more than anything. We need somebody that can actually sit there and talk to people on the other side, even though they don't want to talk to them, and finally get them to talk and to agree with something. Because without it, no matter what side you're on, you're not going to be able to accomplish anything. You can't accomplish anything without help from the other side, period. And I'm the only one that has the full-time experience that has actually done that and created things, had emergency management experience. So I have the experience that we can take further and bring a lot of things back to this district.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, ladies.
Please
and
go to my
gentlemen.
website. Sorry, I want to go to my website at electscanlon.com, where you can see us on Facebook at Scanlon for Congress. Do your homework. It's not a popularity contest. It's not who raises the most money. It's who's going to do the right job. And a 26-year-old, yeah, she's got some coffers, but she's got no life experience. So do your homework and vote Scanlon for Congress in District 21.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being on here today. Let's hope we can do this again just before the election. Thank you for watching. There were the congressional candidates for District 21, Palm Beach County, South Florida. They all participated, 5 of the 6. Laura Luma refused to participate or respond to any requests to come on. Feels she's been endorsed by many people. We would have liked to have heard from her, but we didn't. However, you can please go on all these candidates' sites and read their bios and their platform. I think they're all capable of doing a good job. This is The Hawk, and thank you for watching.